Talked about some of the new Super 7 Reaction Plus figures last week, and now I've got them in hand. This week we're doing a new to the collection episode with some Reaction Plus figures from Super 7 and some classified figures from Hasbro. I want to start by taking a look at Duke and Serpentor here from the O-Ring Plus line. I have not found the big guys yet, the Fatal Fluffy or Ramar, but I do have these guys, and I definitely want to dig into them. I did a video about some of these O-Ring Plus figures in the past. The first wave had Snake Eyes, Cobra Bat, Cobra Commander, and CoverGirl in it. I do like that they put pretty standard looking file cards on the back. They all have new card art, which is pretty decent likeness to their original type art, but like a new pose. It is not meant to be a recreation, kind of the way the 25th anniversary guys, a lot of them had recreations of their original art. This is something new, kind of a slightly different pose. And I like that because it creates some new artwork for the G.I. Joe brand, which is kind of fun. Duke wasn't necessarily supposed to be the poster boy for G.I. Joe when they created a new mail-away character. He was the first sergeant, and so he would have seen some action, but it wasn't like they were like, we're going to make the face of G.I. Joe. But because Sunbow used him sort of as the main character in the first miniseries, and then moved forward with that sort of that dynamic and those characters as created, Duke became the face of the brand because of the cartoon. So it's fun to finally have a O-ring version of him looking like his cartoon self. I loved that Super 7 did these guys in their larger Ultimates line, but I'm also very excited to have them in these O-ring formats. So Duke has his tan shirt, he's got green pants, he's got brown boots with some extra detailing like the cartoon. He has his strap that goes all the way around, a little bandolier type strap. He looks really good. His arms are pretty skinny, but I think that works when they're specifically based on the cartoon, because the characters were fairly skinny. His head can only turn side to side, and it's pretty limited. It doesn't even go, like, 90 degrees. He's got about a 45-degree arc that he can turn his head. So it's a little bit limited, but not terrible. He, of course, comes with the classic G.I. Joe laser rifle that pretty much everybody used in the cartoon. It's based on the weapon that Snowjob came with. If there was one accessory to give anybody in this line, it's this one. I'm sure they're going to get a lot of mileage out of that mold. Molded in brown, which is pretty much the color it was in the show a lot. His second accessory is a little headband. This is episode specific from one of the miniseries, and you can pop this thing on Duke's head. You can pop this on his head, and then Destro or Cobra Commander can control him with an Atari joystick. It's a good-looking figure. He's got the little pinkish red tabs on the top of his shirt. He's got his airborne wings on his chest there. His belt buckle's painted in. I think it really is a nice combination of cartoon look and, vintage styling to it, but with, a nice amount of the details painted in the way we kind of would expect with a modern figure. He looks really good. I'm very excited to have this figure. It's not exactly a repaint, but I would love to see them do a bunch of these guys in their winter coats from G.I. Joe the movie. It was something I kind of wanted as a kid, and I could see them doing it because they probably would just need to tool up a torso and arms for Duke, and they could reuse this head and reuse these legs and make that winter outfit version of him. And I could see a lot of characters from both sides really getting done up in that format based on their appearances in the movie if this line keeps going. Next up, we're taking a look at Serpentor. Serpentor, file name, NA. Primary military specialty, Conquest. Secondary military specialty, Command. Birthplace, Cobra Island. I am the one born to rule and destined to conquest. Let those who fear me follow me. Let those who oppose me perish. For I am Serpentor, and this I command. Serpentor is a cool figure. He was a deluxe figure in the original line, coming with a small vehicle. Here we're getting him carded, which is, not his typical release. When I was a kid in first grade, my best friend Derek, we had to do like an assignment where we talked about what we wanted for Christmas, like one thing we were asking for, and I guess this would have been 88 or 89, depending on the time of the year. I guess 88. And my buddy Derek said he wanted Serpentor for Christmas, and I was like, oh, I think that's going to be tough. I haven't seen him in stores in a long time. And little to no surprise, Derek got Serpentor for Christmas, but he had drawn this little doodle, kid crayon drawing of Serpentor, and it actually was on a bulletin board at his house, like in his childhood bedroom, for decades of us growing up, and I always remember telling him that I didn't think he'd get it, and he did. Alright, so we've got Serpentor out of the package, and my first thing I notice is the cape is not clothy enough. This has been a thing, a pet peeve of mine, a thing that I talk about with toys that come with capes. You can do molded plastic and they look really good in one pose, like if you want it wind-swept. And if you're just going to do fabric, then it needs to be real clothy. This feels like a vinyl... it's not actually vinyl, but it kind of feels like a vinyl cape. It's super stiff. You can't pose it. It's got permanent wrinkles in it just from it being put in the package. It's a shiny green material. It's very smooth feeling. Maybe less tear resistant than his vintage cape, but still not really a great material. Now, he doesn't have the big biceps that the vintage one had, so you might actually be able to get this cape off without destroying it. I do know that Cape Master, a guy on Instagram, I believe, makes replacement Serpentor capes. I actually bought one, a repro one, just for display purposes, and maybe I will move that one to this figure to make this guy look better, or order another one. The reason I'm taking his cape off is I wanted to take a look at this backpack piece here. I've been very curious how they were handling the snakes on his shoulders, because the vintage snakes never really stuck out enough. They just looked like they were molded on detail, but in the cartoon they moved like they were living snakes. So when I take off his backpack, I can see that the snakes molded on his chest there just are the bodies, and now they've put the heads on the backpack piece, his hood, the hood for the King Cobra, allowing them to be molded a little bit more with a little bit more detail and kind of stick up the way they do. So this doesn't really work if you take the backpack off, but why would you? It makes him work really well. I think this is a huge improvement there. Again, the skinnier arms. He does have his little techno doodad on his wrist, whatever that was supposed to be. He still has the snake faces with the fangs on his hands. He is not metallic gold plastic, which means he should hold up better. He's just sort of a yellow mustardy plastic with some yellow paint for the center parts. He looks pretty good. I feel like the head lost a little bit of dimension. The vintage Serpentor has a sort of weird misformed head sealed with a helmet glued over it. So that the head is like a weird shape, so that way the helmet didn't have to be too big. But it gave it a lot of depth because it was actually two parts. So this loses some of that, like the fangs from his helmet are molded right to his face. Again, that'll help prevent breakage that the vintage one had, but it's not quite as good looking. And then I find it interesting, his boots are yellow. The toy has green shoes. And I guess I would have to watch the cartoon again to see whether they were always yellow or if sometimes they were green, if this was a choice or if this is how the animation model actually looks for Serpentor in the cartoons. So there's some improvements here and some reduction in features in a way here. With the helmet not being its own piece glued on, you've lost some of that detail there, but the snakes look a lot better. It's kind of a mixed bag, whether you love this or hate this, but one of the things that I really like about this O-Ring line is it's giving me modern G.I. Joes that have a similar format to the older ones. It allows me to play, pose, whatever with these figures and not worry about snapping their thumbs off, putting their weapons in their hand, or breaking foot pegs, displaying them. And that's kind of what I like about this. Yes, this is probably a more cartoon accurate than the figure version, but Serpentor is a character that I never felt like had a huge difference between the cartoon and the toy. It was a pretty good translation, whereas some characters are a little bit more extreme in those variations. He also comes with a knife. The vintage action figure came with a little knife and a pet snake, along with his little skimmer. This version just has the knife. I don't think he ever used it in the cartoon, but, you need some sort of an accessory. So he's got his little backpack headdress, he's got his knife, and he's got his cape. Next up, I want to talk about the Crimson Twins. These are the Twins from the O-Ring Plus line. I got these after I did my video for Wave 1 of Reaction Plus, and I was going to shoot a video about these guys, and it just never happened. It just kind of fell off the radar, so I'm finally doing it. I love this vintage packaging. It's got these reflective mirror parts. This looks very similar to the packaging these figures originally came in, except this time they're in their extensive Enterprises suits, and so the artwork has been modified to match that. They still have a shared file card here. Their file names are still classified, even though in canon they've been given names through the comics. So that's kind of fun there. Spell Tomax in capital letters and hold it up to a mirror. It reads Zaymont. The same holds true for the actual brothers. Alright, I'm going to pop these guys out of the package. I'm going to be very careful. I was told that somebody broke their guys, taking them right out of the package. So I don't know if this blue plastic is more brittle. I'm going to be real careful trying to take them out of the package. I have one memory about the original packaging for the Crimson Twins. Kind of a little while after they should have been out of retail, I saw them at a toy store, and I don't remember what type of toy store it was. I guess it was independent, but there was like a big mall, like 40 minutes from my house, and then there was like a small mall that was like 25 minutes from our house. And we went to the small mall a lot more often. It didn't have as many exciting things in it. But the toy store there had the twins in package what seemed like well after they should have been out of stores. And I remember seeing them there and being so impressed with the way they looked in the package. I didn't beg for them because I think I had them loose. I actually got the twins at a yard sale when I was a kid, minus their little hook accessory. The twins came packaged in a double layer here. There is one layer with the twins and their weapons, and one layer with their briefcase. Opening up the twins reminds me of a complaint I had from Wave 1 about them having very skinny arms, skinny legs, and what felt like oversized accessories. And again, we have very skinny arms, very smooth legs with little detail to them. They feel super glossy. The Duke figure that I just got from the next wave still has the very skinny arms. His legs are still pretty skinny. He feels less glossy, but maybe he just has been painted. Serpentor feels the most different, having a lot of texture to him, but he still has those very skinny upper arms. So nothing's really changed in that department, but it's one of those things I'm kind of watching as we go through the waves, if we'll see a little bit more beef to them and a little bit more level of detail. I know they're based on a cartoon, and the cartoon doesn't have a ton of detail, so they're not going crazy with it on these figures, but they do feel just a little bit funny. I also am not super happy with the paintwork on my twins. The paint mask just sort of doesn't quite touch the edge of their hair, leaving sort of like a funny, what looks like almost unpainted spot when you look at them from the front. And, you know, if there's going to be some sort of blemish to the paint, I'd rather it be from the back. Now, the twins wore these suits a lot in the cartoon, but the only time we got action figure versions of them, there was a Crimson Guard pack in the mid-2000s where they used the Headman body, released kind of in these colors with the Crimson Twin heads on them. It was like an okay substitution. It was not a bad attempt for a... We're not sculpting any new parts, but it's fun to kind of have these guys really the way they should look. They each come with a blaster. That blaster looks a lot like a Kenner Star Wars weapon. They don't seem quite as bulky as the Wave 1 accessories do, so I think that's a slight improvement, but I'm glad they came with weapons. Their other accessories are their briefcases. Now, you might think their briefcases would be full of money or something like that. There's a sculpted and painted version of their Crimson Guard commander uniform folded up inside the briefcase, which is kind of a fun little detail for them to carry around. Zaymont was always my favorite. He was the one with the scar. Their faces were more distinct in those original sculpts. These guys really are just clones of each other. They probably just sculpted one, mirrored it, and then added the scar, whereas the original ones were hand sculpted, so they were very similar, but they had a slightly different facial expression between the two, making them more distinct. Before I move on to the classified figures, there's a little bit of toy news I want to talk about. Super 7 hasn't revealed these figures yet, but their images were leaked. For the Ultimate Thundercats line, there are going to be 3 new figures in this next upcoming wave. The previous wave, I don't think I bought anybody from. I really have been cutting back on that line. We have a lot of the core characters, and I have kind of mixed feelings about getting every single character they decide to do. I first, I think, skipped stuff when they did the Reptilian Army Builder set. This wave they've got Nada. She's one of the warrior women. She's the younger sister of Willa. I was very excited to get Willa because they'd never done a figure of her, and she's the leader of the warrior women, and that was kind of like a group that was in the cartoon a lot. Her younger sister was also in the cartoon quite a bit, but feels a little bit like a rehash. You know, once you have Willa, Nada seems kind of the same. So I'm up in the air whether I would jump at her. Next, they've got Safari Joe. He's like a big game hunter. Kind of a silly character in some ways, in the sense that, like, there aren't really humans on Third Earth. He did have a vintage action figure, so that gives him some kind of bonus points for, like, deserving to be made as a figure. And I think he's pretty cool. I am tempted to get him out of this wave a fair amount. And the last one is Crusher. He is a big, oversized figure. He was one of the Marauders. Hammerhand was the leader of the Marauders, the guy with a big yellow fist. And all the rest of the Marauder figures were like big, oversized toys. Some of which I think they'll have a hard time making in this line. Or maybe they'll make them all, maybe they won't. In some ways, I would rather get all the Lunatics first. But I do like the Marauders, and so I am inclined to get Crusher, because if they can't do the big figures in this line tanks real fast, we'll never get all the Lunatics, and I would like to get them, but like I said, I'm not a completist on this line anymore. I didn't get Quick Pick, or whatever his name was. I didn't get Snarfer. I didn't get Quick Pick. I didn't get the kid version of Lion-O. They're all cool characters, and if Thundercats was the only line I collected, then I would have gotten them all, because they're great. You know, it's neat to see characters that didn't get figures in the past. But, you know, trying to limit what I'm buying, trying to allocate resources to the things that I like the most. G.I. Joe O-Ring is kind of important to me. So that's a lot of what I've been getting. And so I've been cutting back on the Ultimates. I've cut back on the Ninja Turtle Ultimates a while ago and wasn't getting, like, Turtle variants. And I'm not really getting sort of Super 7 exclusive designed characters. I'm mostly just getting stuff that is close to a reissue of the original Playmates things, which I know has become a problem for Super 7. They're not doing as many of those characters. So that's where it's at, but I do like the Thundercats Ultimates. I did not get Cat's Lair, so there will not be a review of that on this channel. It looks fantastic, but it's a space hog. It was very expensive, and I'm, again, like I said, cutting back on what I'm doing in some of those areas. Alright, I got 3 classified Joes we're going to go through. I'm going to start with Saw Viper. The original Saw Viper action figure is not really one of my favorites. Some people really like him because he stood out with that purple coloring. For me, the only thing that really made Saw Viper cool was the fact that there was a lone Saw Viper character in the comic who had an important impact on the story. It was rare to see Vipers of any kind have any importance beyond just, you know, being in a battle or saying something to Cobra Commander. But we had one Saw Viper character who was responsible for the deaths of multiple G.I. Joes and was just a prick. And so that's what makes Saw Viper cool to me. I always thought his original figure, the gun was too big. He just really couldn't hold it well. His head was maybe a little bit small. His color scheme's fine. Obnoxious, but fine. And so here we have a Saw Viper. He comes with this big neck armor plate, which I don't think he needs to look like the vintage Saw Viper, but isn't a bad idea for kind of armoring him up. He does come with a removable helmet. When you take that off, his head is covered in a ski mask kind of thing. I guess I always thought of that as a chin strap, but in this interpretation, it's a mask. But that he looks pretty good like this. I just felt like this collar piece maybe is too bulky. I'm going to throw it back on there just to see what it looks like with it on. But yeah, if you're going for a more vintage look, he probably doesn't need that collar. That collar works well, though, if you're trying to go for a more like modern, classified version. You know, and I do appreciate it when they make these kind of things so you can do kind of both looks. Saw Viper has a knife. Oh, he's got a sheath on the back of his belt for that. He's got a pistol, which can go in a holster on the side of his leg. He's got an ammo belt. He's got a big backpack because he needs to carry around a lot of ammo. So you can plug in his ammo belt. And then his main weapon. So the Saw in Saw Viper stands for semi-automatic weapon. And they gave him a machine gun here but it has a chainsaw attachment, I guess to make it a saw viper for people that don't know what saw really is. Sure, fine, whatever. You can remove that, or you can give it to him as like a handheld weapon. It's got a pivoting handle on the top for like an overhand grip, and then a sort of back chainsaw looking handle. So this gun is very different from the vintage figure, but possibly a little bit easier to have him hold. And then the ammo strip should come around here and probably plug into his ammo clip there. I'll have to play around with it a little bit. Oh, maybe it inserts into the side of the weapon here. So I'll futz with it, see if I can get it to work. He's a pretty good looking figure. I think he works well for, like I said, both looks. If you want these more modern, classified with all the extra details, he looks pretty good. But he also looks pretty good as like a vintage figure version. Next up, we got Xandar. I've always had some mixed feelings on Xandar. He is Zartan's brother and Zarana's twin, or just other brother. I'm not really sure there on Xandar and Zarana. They came out at the same time, so they're sort of linked. Xandar never really took off the way Zarana did. He didn't live on in media quite the same way. But I had him as a kid growing up. I also had Zarana and Road Pig. I think those were my main Dreadnoks. And then eventually I was able to get the original 3 guys with Ripper, Torch, and Buzzer at like a comic book shop where I used to buy older Joes from. I didn't have Zartan until I was an adult collector. So Xandar got a lot of play, but I never thought he was like anything exceptionally great. He has like orange hair and the pink handkerchief. He doesn't really wear much clothing. He's got like tattoos or face paint, lightning bolts on his chest. And he had a lot of gold paint that just sort of rubbed off his action figure very early on, and then he didn't look as interesting very quickly. So this figure does still have a lot of those gold details, but the modern paint is different. He does have the lightning bolt things on his chest, I believe, the tattoos, but they're mostly covered up with this vest. This is a very classified detail where, you know, they're kind of like modernizing him. I don't mind this so much because it was kind of weird that Xandar walked around bare-chested all the time when they're constantly getting into gunfights. So I don't mind him having a little Kevlar vest. They did add a little bit of details to his armbands and things like that. He's got a Dreadnoks tattoo on his exposed wrist there. This is a pretty even balance. Definitely more classified than I'd go if I was picking, but not so classified version that I skipped him. Plus, I also have a feeling we're not going to get him on a retro card. He's not that popular of a character. Again, like the Saw Viper, he has a sheath on his back for a knife. He's got some chains there, like he's got a chain wallet going on. He has a blue backpack. It has some things kind of sticking out of the top. Those, I believe, are the arrows, so it is still like a quiver backpack, but they made it look less like a quiver backpack. I do like they made his hair a little longer. They made the handkerchief a little bit bigger. Gives him a nice look. He's got a pistol that can go in the holster on his leg. My holster is a little bit deformed here, so I gotta shove that in there and stretch it back out. He came with a funny fighting knife tool. I don't know what you want to call that. Sort of a classified looking accessory there. He's got a holster on his chest for what looks like a very small pistol. I didn't see one in the package. It doesn't look like I left anything behind, so I don't know if that's meant to be open. I might have to look online and see if he was supposed to come with something there, or if that just is an extra holster. Maybe this is a reused part, and they didn't throw a pistol in for him. And then he comes with his larger dart gun, which is pretty traditional to his original action figure. I like that the dart tip is painted silver. It works pretty well. I'm pretty pleased with this figure. Yeah, the original Xandar did have a holster on his chest. He had those 2 straps, and he had a pistol there. So they left that one empty and gave him a bigger one. Can this bigger one fit up there? Not well. You could stick it in there, but it's not going to fit in where you could strap it down. So, one of those details that's sort of addressed, but not quite addressed with this figure. But it's fine. I don't think that that's like a make or break point. The last figure for today's episode is Leatherneck. And I really thought I ordered 2 Leathernecks. Maybe I only ordered one from this site and I ordered one from somewhere else. I'm going to have to look into this. I am collecting the Marines for my nephew. His dad, my brother-in-law, is a retired Marine. And when he's old enough to play with action figures, I'm going to send him Sergeant Slaughter and Gung Ho and Leatherneck, so he can have some Marines to play with. When I went to pop Leatherneck's gun out of the package, it fell on the floor, like shot out of the package. And when I picked it up, it is missing the clip. I assume that fell out on the floor, and hopefully I can find it. So if it shows up in the B-roll, it's there. If not, I lost it for good. Interesting. So one of my Patreon supporters, Josh, got his figure the day before I did, and was actually asking about this little bracelet. It's a separate piece on him. He did have a little bracelet on the vintage figure, and I don't know whether this is a specific detail to him, beyond the figure, if there was like a reason for it specifically. I always wondered maybe if Ron Rudat wore a bracelet like that, since Leatherneck's vintage face is Ron Rudat's face. This figure maybe looks a little bit less like Ron, although maybe not completely different from Ron. He has a removable hat, which is cool, because that is something we've never had before. I would like to see them do blue dress uniforms with a couple of the Marines. There is original Gung Ho in the blue dress, and that seems like it sets a precedent to include them in a set. But since Leatherneck's hat comes off, Sergeant Slaughter's hat comes off, Gung Ho's hat comes off, they could perhaps make a version, a set where they could make a body and then put 2 or 3 of those characters in with the, the white hat, the blue uniform, the sword. I think that could be kind of cool. So he has a knife, and there's a sheath for that on his vest. A pistol with a holster for that on his hip. He's got a little walkie-talkie on the other hip. That is molded into his uniform, and he's wearing a wristwatch. As I mentioned, he's got his gun with the grenade launcher on the bottom. Mine is currently missing the clip. Hopefully I can find that when I'm done shooting, rummage around on the floor. I actually thought 2 things popped out of the package, like I kind of heard 2 different noises hit the floor, but nothing else was missing from the packaging but the gun, and then when I picked the gun up off the floor, there was no clip there. He comes with a nice backpack with the bedroll on it, again matching his vintage accessory pretty nicely, but with some additional paint apps. He does have some markings on his shoulder, which is great. He comes with a set of fists, so if you want him to brawl, that's kind of nice. Definitely something we're seeing less of in this line, and something I'm okay with. Unless you need that hand for something specific, like if a character came with a specialized accessory that needed a special hand to hold it properly, then it makes sense. Once you've released a few sets of varied ungloved hands and a few sets of gloved, like black gloved hands, most of the times you can make it work between, several action figures. He also comes with a set of safety glasses, which is fantastic. Modern military on the range kind of thing. We're going to wear safety glasses to protect our eyes. A lot of the, modern day soldiers wear sunglasses that are rated for safety, for protection, all the time. So that's kind of a fun detail if you're doing a more modern version of Leatherneck, or you're doing a scene at a shooting range. It's not really something I'm going to probably display on mine, because I want him to look like the 80s figure, but cool accessory nonetheless. So 2 new classified figures to the collection, 2 brand new O-ring figures to the collection, plus the twins, who have been down in the basement for a while, just hadn't gotten opened yet on video for you guys to see. This is a problem I happen to have, where I've been making toy review videos or videos talking about toys for so long that I rarely open toys without the camera rolling. And so if I'm not currently filming when something comes in, it comes down here in the basement, and then I often have a backlog, because if this week 2 toys came in, but I'm not shooting a video where I'm going to put them into it, like I haven't been releasing an episode with Tony from Hack the Movies, or I'm releasing something that was specific to, the Tomahawk or hanging the Star Wars ships, all old videos you should check out. This stuff doesn't get opened. So there are piles of stuff around down here. There's still Power Rangers Lightning Collection figures I didn't open. There's still closed box and first type boxed G.I. Joe classified figures down here that haven't been opened. In the comments down below, let me know which one of these figures that you think is the best. Are you a big classifieds fan? Are you an O-ring fan? If I had to pick one figure from today that's my favorite, it would probably be Leatherneck, although if we went with figure I've been waiting a lifetime to have, Cartoon Duke. Some good stuff here. Thank you for watching. Please come back every Wednesday for a new episode. Stay safe if you're on the East Coast, or I hope that you are still safe. If you're on the East Coast, we were going to get some snow early in the week on Monday. This episode's coming out on a Wednesday. And if you're on the West Coast, I hope you're doing all right. I'm hoping the weather can start cooperating for these fires to be, put out and under control. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done so, share this video with a toy collecting friend. If you want to support the channel further, consider joining us on Patreon. Thanks for hanging on the peg with me.